Alright. There are the democratic, modern, prosperous industrial nations. That's us. We've just seen what can happen, indeed is likely to happen to us for at least a while longer. Then there is the contiguous Soviet bloc, that is, Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. These nations are non-democratic, but they are mostly industrial and mostly modern, albeit at standards of living much lower than are common in the West. And then there are the other countries, mostly the less developed countries, LDCs, also called the Third World Nations. These nations exhibit a wide variety of political, economic, and demographic patterns. For our purposes here, however, we categorize this block by what they are not, quote-unquote. The Third Worlders are not both industrial and democratic. In the rare cases where one might stretch a point, they have not been either democratic or industrial over an extended continuous period of time. Argentina, South Korea. This third world category would include democratic India, which is not industrial. It would include communist China, which is neither democratic nor industrial. It would include non-communist, non-industrial, non-democratic Indonesia. It would include all of Africa. Almost entirely non-free and poor.
Which is crap.
Yeah. It would include all of Latin America, less developed democracies like Colombia and Brazil, and more developed non-democracies like Chile, possible exception, Venezuela. It would include the Arab oil states, some of which are wealthy, but none of which are democratic. Despite the exceptions, it will be useful to remember that for weighting as in like a weight, purposes, this third world category of nations is predominantly poor and mostly non-democratic. Recalling again that demographers do know something about the future, most particularly how many potential mothers will be present 20 or so years from now because so many have already been born, we can look briefly at trends in the rest of the world. Again, we will be using World Bank/UN projections, and it should be noted that these projections incorporate a continuing decline in the TFRs of third world areas down to a 2.3 rate in 2025. What of the Soviet bloc? In contrast to the projected shrinkage in the modern democracies, the communist bloc nations will be growing. Wow. Today, the Warsaw Pact nations, Soviet Union plus Western Europe, have, as a whole, a total fertility rate of 2.3 births per woman. That is well above the replacement rate of 2.1. It is 28% higher than the 1.8 rate of the industrial democracies taken as a whole. This comes about due to some mixed demographic circumstances in Eastern Europe and the USSR. Consider first Eastern Europe. As industrial countries, the Western European nations tend toward low fertility. As a group, however, their TFR stands now at 2.1 children per woman. Just about replacement level, but still 31% higher than the devastatingly low rate of 1.6 now prevalent in their counterpart nations of Western Europe, whose low rates are incorporated in the graphs of all Western nations on pages 31 and 32, and presented separately on page 94. In some few cases, this higher Eastern European fertility has come about partly because the Eastern European communist governments have not hesitated to use their considerable police and government powers to try to force fertility rates up. Romania is the prime culprit. It has not only banned abortion, but set up a birth monitoring apparatus to help prevent illegal abortions. I'm pretty sure illegal abortion still happens.
Oh yeah.
More about this later. On the other hand, the East Germans generally have not been coercive. But they are currently spending an inordinately large part of their gross national product on birth bounties and child incentives, particularly for third children in a family. Other East European governments are also spending a great deal to offer baby bonuses, as well as to manipulate their housing and whoa. Sorry. Other East European governments are also spending a great deal to offer baby bonuses, as well as to manipulate their housing and employment systems in order to encourage childbearing. What the long-term results of these pro-natalist schemes will be remains to be seen, as well as will be discussed at some length in Chapter 10. For now, they have been quite successful, as the chart on the next page shows. But the most important aspect of higher communist bloc fertility lies outside Eastern Europe, specifically in the Soviet Union and within the Soviet Union, in the Central Asian republics of the Soviet Union. And there is a chart, F4, projected population of communist Eastern Europe, on page 41. The projected years between 1985 and 2100. Note, includes the following countries: Albania, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Hungary, Poland, Romania. Sources from World Population Projections, 1984 World Bank. The Soviet Union is the world's last remaining far-flung empire. It also serves as a single-nation microcosm of the strange birth patterns currently transforming our world. In the European areas of the Soviet Union, fertility levels are about at the level of their Eastern European neighbors. The Soviets began a significant pronatalist policy in 1981, which included offering women 1 year of partially paid maternal leave. The Communist Party Congress in 1986 increased the time to 1.5 years. Apparently, it has worked. U.S. Census demographer Ward Kincaid estimates that the TFR in the European parts of the Soviet Union has risen from below replacement levels to about replacement levels from the late 1970s to the mid-1980s. Thus, the large Russian Republic within the Soviet Union, RSFSR, is currently producing about 2.1 children per woman, according to the Census Bureau. Our census scholars, through assiduous study of Russian data, may know more about Soviet demographics than the Soviets themselves know. But the South Central Republics of the USSR resemble very high third world nations in fertility, as well as other ways. At last measurement, Tajikistan registered a TFR of 5.5 births per woman. The rate of Uzbekistan is 4.7. The rates in the Azerbaijan Republic, Kyrgyzstan, and other Central Asian areas are also high. These regions are populated predominantly by Muslims. It's spelled like Muslims.
Yeah.
My God. Thanks in large measure to the prolific reproduction of its Central Asian minorities, the Soviet Union as a whole has a TFR of 2.4. That is about a third higher than the US. It is half, again, higher than Western Europe. According to the UN/World Bank data, the Soviet Union is slated to grow by about 100 million people in the next 100 years. The growth line for the Soviet Union looks like this, including a gradual decline in Central Asian fertility. So on page 42, there's chart 4G, projected population of the Soviet Union, 1985 to 2100. Okay. The U.S. Census projections of Soviet fertility are higher than the UN/World Bank set, showing a Soviet population ranging from 370 to 386 million by the year 2050, about 30 years before the UN/World Bank data approached those numbers. And so, while our population in the West will be flattening out and going down, see page 32, the population of the communist bloc will be going up, as can be seen from the chart below, which combines the populations of Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. Page 43, there's chart 4H, projected population of the industrial communist world, 1985 to 2100. Note, includes the following countries: USSR, Albania, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Hungary, Poland, Romania. Source, World Population Projections, 1984 World Bank. The communist bloc grows from 390 million people today to about 515 million by 2065. Some potent implications of the East-West fertility differentials will be explored later. What about the less developed world? Without much popular notice, the last 15 years have seen a tremendous and heartening decline in third world fertility, from a UN measured TFR level of 6.1 in 1970 to 4.1 in 1985. That represents a fall halfway toward the goal of long-term population stability, a TFR of 2.1 children. As mentioned earlier, the UN projections are based on a continuing fertility decline in the developing world, all the way to an average of 2.3 children by 2025. This sounds good. All things considered, it is good. But remember momentum. The third world is now awash in the fruit of those TFRs in the 6+ range from a generation ago. Today, there are 1.1 billion women of childbearing age in the less developed world. I wonder what he considers childbearing age. Even if these women reduce their fertility, as the United Nations projects, there will be a flood of third world babies, a real flood. Third world population, which is now 3.7 billion persons, is slated to rise to over 8 billion people by the middle of the next century. At the same time, the West will be going down. The third world projections look like this. Page 44, chart 4I, projected populations of the less developed countries, 1985 to 2100. Note, less developed countries include all nations of Africa, Asia, Central and South America, except Japan. Source, World Population Projections, 1984, World Bank. In short, the free West goes way down, the non-free Soviet bloc goes up moderately, and the poor nations go way up. From a Western perspective, if you were to put them all together, the sad picture looks like this. Page 45, chart 4J. Huh? Oh. Should we stop for now?
Sure.